Okay, so we're just going to wait as people join us. Thank you everyone for your patience. We had some Zoom issues this morning. We're going to give everyone about 30 seconds or so to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. Please make sure that you join the audio so that you can hear everything our wonderful, brilliant panelists are going to say. And feel free to say hello in the chat, maybe include your organization. And if you have questions for the panelists at any time, drop those into the Q&A. That is where I will be pulling questions from later. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and get started. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today on this Monday morning. I hope everybody's got a little bit of snow wherever you are. I am Monica Carey. I am the Pennsylvania Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, and I'm going to be moderating our panel today. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce our panelists. We have a great group today. So I'm going to begin by introducing Senator Nikki Antonio, who is the Ohio Senate Minority Leader. Senator Antonio was elected to the Senate in 2018 and previously spent 8 years in the Ohio House of Representatives. She has been a dedicated champion of workers' rights, high-quality education, local governments, equal rights for women and the LGBTQIA+ community, healthcare for all, and fighting the opioid crisis. Senator Antonio is recognized as a leader who reaches across the aisle to get things done. She has made a career of being the first and continues these historic firsts with her Senate leadership position of Minority Whip, Assistant Minority Leader in 2021, and currently serves as the Senate Minority Leader. Thank you, Leader Antonio, for being with us today. And next, I would like to introduce Tony Ranieri. He is the founder and president of Solar is Freedom. Tony has 10 years of experience in construction and 5 years in solar. He was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. In 2016, Tony founded Solar is Freedom, a solar installation company that operates on the premise that every homeowner should have the opportunity to take control of their energy future. It's great to have you with us today, Tony. And finally, we are joined by Mariah Williams, who is the Ohio Program Associate of Solar United Neighbors. Mariah is a sustainability-minded individual. She started with Sun in 2021 by advocating for the solar rights of those living within a homeowners association. This is an issue near to her because her own HOA tried to stop her from going solar. She became the Ohio Program Associate at Sun in 2022, where she oversees solar co-ops and policy work. And we're excited to learn more about your work on this bill, Mariah. Thank you for your time today. And we also today have Tristan Rader, who is the Solar United Neighbors Ohio Program Director. And Tristan will be helping me in keeping track of Q&A. So again, throughout the webinar, please pop your questions for panelists into the Q&A. We have our own questions, and then at the end, we'll be able to take questions from the audience. So for anyone who doesn't know, Tristan, Mariah, and I all work for Solar United Neighbors. We are a national nonprofit organization that focuses on rooftop solar and the policies that impact solar owners. This session is centered around the property rights of solar owners who live in homeowners associations, or HOAs. And I'd like to take a few minutes to provide some background and context for why we view this as a critical issue in the realm of solar policy. Homeowners associations are becoming more and more common, with 80% of homes built since 2000 being part of an association. Many associations place rules and restrictions on their members' homes under the premise that they are at least maintaining, if not increasing, the property value of all the homes in an association. This principle comes to a head with the installation of solar panels. 3 national studies, 2 by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and 1 from Zillow, have demonstrated that the installation of solar increases the resale value of a home. This is because solar lowers your electricity bills, a benefit that many are willing to pay a premium for. Solar panels themselves, however, are often deemed to not fulfill aesthetic requirements placed by HOAs, thereby allowing for the association to restrict or outright reject solar installations on their members' property. As a rule, if an HOA's governing documents don't directly address solar, you can assume it is not permitted. But that uncertainty, as you can guess, causes its own issues in homeowners losing non-refundable deposits if the board changes their mind. In some extreme cases, members have been sued by their HOAs. Add this to all the economic impacts on the solar industry that loses business from these seemingly arbitrary rules and restrictions, and you can see the need for statewide legislative action. Solar access laws keep HOAs from placing unreasonable restrictions on solar installations on their members' property. 30 states in the US have a solar access law in place. They have been passed in states with wildly varying political situations. In the past year alone, solar access laws have been adopted everywhere from Missouri to Connecticut to Ohio. Many of our audience members are based out of Pennsylvania, where there is no solar access law. That is why we turn today to our panelists who can provide their perspective and insight around passing solar access legislation. They're all residents of Ohio and each played a role in the passage of Senate Bill 61 last year that included a solar access provision. So with that background in mind, I'm going to turn first to Mariah. Can you give us an overview of the solar provisions of SB 61, what it did and who it impacted?
Sure. So Senate Bill 61, our sponsors for that were Senator Lou Blessing. He's from the Cincinnati area of our state, and then Senator Nikki Antonio, who is joining us today from the Lakewood area, which is up by Cleveland. And so they both work within large metro areas and see a lot of these developments that have those solar access laws within them. So the basic parts of the solar access law, though, were that they would require planned communities to have new ones that are developing their bylaws, that they would have to have some way built in to help to insure, maintain, repair, replace those solar installations, that they wouldn't just be allowed to purposefully exclude them the same way, that they would have to build in some rules that there would be a pathway to being able to go solar. And then within your already existing planned communities, it helps those folks because if it isn't mentioned as being excluded, then they needed to come up with those same types of pathways. So that way, homeowners that were already in an HOA or homeowners that were not in an HOA yet, but were developing one or moving into a complex that would have one, would both have ways to be able to come up with a reasonable set of guidelines to be able to have them and to be able to, protect the value of the other homes by having the placement and size type requirements for the systems.
That's great. Thank you, Mariah. So, Leader Antonio, this bill was introduced with bipartisan support. How did you build that bipartisan coalition to sponsor the bill?
Sure. So first of all, we worked on this over 2 general assemblies, and I think that's important because it gave us time. We're never happy when we don't get something over the finish line right away, but it did. And the silver lining is that it did give us a chance to continue to educate members about what this was and what it was not, because often to get a piece of legislation over the finish line, it's important to educate members and make sure that they understand, look, the reality is they're not going to read all of that legislation. So it's our job and the job of advocates, certainly like the groups that are, I'm sure many people on this call are a part of. As you come in and educate legislative members, it really makes the difference. So actually, Senator Blessing reached out to me because we had done some work on other kinds of issues like this before. He knew I had talked to him about how important it was to get this piece of this amendment, this information about the condos into legislation, and he had the perfect bill. So it all kind of gelled together. Part of the reason why that was possible is because so much of being a legislator is relationship building. It's part of being an advocate. It's part of being a legislator as well. And so we were able to, he just had the perfect bill to be able to address these issues. So it was luck, timing, and relationships.
That's great. That's a perfect way of putting it. So Tony, in Pennsylvania, we've been in touch with one installer who estimates his company loses out on about $1 million of business per year because of restrictive HOA rules. In your opinion, what is the broader economic impact of the solar provisions in SB 61?
I think, and I appreciate being here with everyone today. So thanks for having me. I think that from an economic perspective, I think that, solar companies benefit, when we can install more work. So I think that from that macro or from that micro level, we see an increase in business, but when you walk into a neighborhood that has previously disallowed the relationship with companies like ours and solar panels, it really, you're allowing for hundreds, if not in some cases, thousands of people to be eligible for this program. So when one person sees a home go solar, and it really is a domino effect. I mean, so what you're doing is you're opening up the entire community to new opportunities from a clean energy generation perspective. And then you're taking pressure off of the grid as a whole. So when more homeowners, particularly in Ohio, in the Midwest, Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Pennsylvania, when more homeowners are going solar, that demand generation, it drops. So you're seeing less pressure put on the grid as a whole. And so even if 10 or 20 or 30 homeowners in a home in an HOA of 1,000 homes go solar, you're actually reducing the overall cost per kilowatt hour that people are paying for their energy in general. I mean, so you're also seeing an increased opportunity for, we employ 150 people from the state of Ohio. So as the ability for solar to increase in these areas, 15 to 20% increase in revenue, you're seeing people from Ohio getting jobs. You're seeing work staying here. The economic impact that gets opened up when more people get to go solar, that touches so many different areas of our, the economic sphere as a whole, not both in the energy industry and then in the broader economy. So all it does is it frees up more money, it frees up more space for people to have, to spread that wealth around. I mean, so it's a broad financial impact on multiple spaces within our both, the energy economy in Ohio.
And can I just jump in and say that part of why it was also kind of brilliant in a way to start with legislation, where we got people actually on record voting for something that was going to promote solar. It's like creating a runway for other kinds of issues down the road, and just this new way of thinking about energy policy, including solar. And so the condominiums, and because they have the structure and it was getting into their structure and actually just being permissive, also was a really non-threatening, if you will, first way to start this. And then it does all the things that Tony just talked about by increasing visibility, awareness, just seeing it and hearing people talk about it is really going to help with solar policy and renewable energy down the road. So I saw it as a real first step. And like I said, getting people on record, wow, the whole communities were being educated.
It changes the headspace and the mindset of the end user and the consumer, because it's real. It's something that you can sink your teeth into and say, well, it started here. So now it's not just me saying, oh, well, you should buy this because that's what I do for a living and you should. So now there's the teeth from a policy standpoint that says, look, everybody's trying to do this. Everyone's working on this. They're working at it from the governmental level, not just, okay, well, I can save a little bit of money on my energy bill. I don't know if it's worth the fight with my HOA. It changes the headspace of the consumer, which is essential. When policy changes first, then the headspace of the consumer changes. And that's what they've always had on the coasts that we have not had in the Midwest historically.
Yeah, I like that framing, the way of thinking about it as solar access, making it more accessible for homeowners and HOAs, but solar becoming more accessible almost mentally for other homeowners kind of around the state, around the region. I think that's wonderful. Okay, so Mariah, the Solar United Neighbors of Ohio team worked extensively to educate the public about solar access laws. Can you tell us why you got involved and how you got folks into the campaign?
Yeah, so my involvement started from my own journey to try to go solar on my home. So I live in an HOA. There's about 900 homes in my community. So in order to change bylaws, 2/3 of people have to vote for the rule, and we have to have that many participate as well in our vote, because they rigged it up to start with in our bylaws that it's not just whoever votes counts. You have to have the vast majority of homeowners actually participate in the voting in order for there to be a vote even take place. So it's nearly impossible with 900 homes to get 650 plus of them to participate actively in that voting process. So we've never been able to change any bylaws, and I've lived in my complex for 24 years come this May. So nothing has ever changed in here. And since it is an older complex, and it's been around for, going on 30 years now, some of the laws are kind of dated. So were not allowed to communicate with us by email, which, as you can guess, is, something that most people now rely on a whole lot more than we did 30 years ago whenever they developed it. That was also one of the rules that changed within Senate Bill 61, is that it mentioned that, electronic mail would now be permitted, even in complexes that maybe didn't have that rule in their bylaws because it didn't exist. So there were some other parts in there that were really great and helpful to homeowners and condo associations that maybe didn't have an easy way to change these rules themselves. But my journey started at the end of 2018. We had just added, we had one electric vehicle. We were getting ready to add a second electric vehicle to our home, and we thought it would be fun to just generate our own energy for those vehicles. And we approached our HOA, and they were like, "That's a no." And I was like, "Why is it a no though?" And they were like, "People don't want to look at those." And I was, I'm like, I don't even know what color my neighbor's roof is. So what would it matter what they had on their roof? I'm not looking at it. And they were like, "Well, the bylaws don't say anything about solar." And so there started our conversation and our journey. And over the next 6 or so months with them, I just kept approaching it, and I was like, "We're allowed to change roofing materials, right? So instead of thinking of them as solar panels, how about you just think of them as a roofing material?" And they were like, "That's still a no." And I was like, "What happens if we, made sure they were the same color as the roof?" And they were like, "Well, maybe, but we'd prefer they were on the back of the house." So then we got into the whole north versus south facing panels conversation, and that they just were not feasible on my north facing rear of my house. And by then, the first round of this Senate bill, I think it was Senate Bill 289. There was a different set of numbers on it on the previous General Assembly, but it was up, and Tristan had sent out emails about it, and which we had received because we had attended an online conversation with Solar United Neighbors. I did not work for the company yet at that point. And so I was like, this is something that we can get behind. So we signed all the things. We called our senator whenever it was up for a vote. You know, we did our small part to try to like get it through. It didn't work. And then, you know, it's a long process, you know, because you've got to go from your Senate committees to your full Senate, to your House committees, to your full House. You know, it's a very back and forth process. So it came up in the new General Assembly, and Tristan sent out emails again saying, you know, hey, we've got this bill. It's been introduced again. And I was like, yes, you know, this is what I need, because my HOA is still, you know, having conversations with me. At least they were open to that, but they haven't moved forward. So we took that step, and I started getting more engaged, and I seen the job posting, and I was like, hey, I've just won my battle. You know, we just went solar through a co-op, and I know about this conversation, and I've been there, done that. It took me 18 months to get them to finally relent and say, you know, probably more so than anything, if you'll stop calling us, sure, you can have solar. But now 9 houses in my complex have gone solar. So once it was open to one of us, it was open to that many more, you know, and it's just a drop in the bucket. We'll get everybody to get solar yet, but you know, these type of rules, so that it makes it just that little bit easier, that they need to have those conversations with us instead of just saying, we don't have it in there, we're not going to talk to you about it, bye, you know, is really great and handy to have. But that's the way I've always led the conversations is, you know, it's not that just that I'm aware of this, it's that I went through it. And, you know, I don't want anybody else to have that. 18 months is a very long time to battle just to be able to get permission to approach solar companies to even get that pricing.
And I'm sure that you found that sharing your story helped people feel more comfortable and confident sharing their stories with their legislators. Was that a key component to helping build support around the bill?
Absolutely. Whenever I first started in my position last year, it was all for policy and education coordination. So we gathered stories on our website of people who were in similar battles, so that we could take those to the senators and to the House reps, especially whenever some people just aren't comfortable talking to their elected officials, you know, that it's just something that's not in their wheelhouse. Maybe they don't feel that they have the educational background to be able to do that. So we were happy to be able to share their stories on their behalf whenever we would go present testimony. And then we were able to use those as well to gather a base of people who needed help through that process. And we also gave them hints and tricks along the way for ways that they might be able to go solar, even if their HOA said not on front facing streets, or not, you know, on another way that would be like, hey, have you tried approaching them about a solar pergola in the backyard? You know, maybe it's not as big as your rooftop, but it might be something that they're open to hearing about, or at least considering. So, and anything you can do to help them get into that mindset, as Tony was saying earlier, you know, it really helps. And once you get one set of panels in there, then they're usually like, well, those don't look like we thought they would. And maybe we can let those in some other places. But we had a course of 3 different, you know, webinars that we did with guest speakers, with other homeowners that were going through battles, just so that people could have that comfortability with each other.
That's great. And from the other side of that perspective, Leader Antonio, I'm sure, you know, you've heard from constituents and many different parties about issues that this bill addresses. What messages or stakeholders were instrumental in convincing you to work to pass on SB 61?
Well, sure. First of all, I've been a strong proponent and supportive of this. I keep trying to convince my wife that we should put solar panels on our house. We're working on it. We're working on getting there. Tristan actually lives around the corner from me, so we walk by his house with the solar panels on all the time. And I said, "Look at that."
So Jean's the one I need to convince. Was that what you're saying?
No, don't do that. She'll be upset with me, but you know, we subtle. So we have great examples in our own community, I guess is the short answer to that. But then, yes, of course, we heard from folks, especially as we started, to Myra's point, especially as we, Mariah, sorry, as Mariah pointed out, as we introduced the bill and then started hearing from people, we heard the stories, condo boards and groups, leadership that just was saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think it's actually good that a few years ago, there was another issue about flying the American flag. And so our legislators were familiar with issues that maybe transcend freedom and rights. And so they had that as almost like a precursor going into this. And again, I think part of the strength of the proposal was the fact that it's permissive and that one still needs to work with their boards, but the whole legislation was about modernizing, the condo boards and how they communicate, all kinds of things that needed to happen. But we definitely, anytime we hear personal stories and I would like to break that myth of that you have to have a special kind of education or training to come and talk to your legislators. We're your representatives. And you just need to talk to us, call us, write us, email us. We want to hear from you. And come and visit the State House, which is your house. And when you do, and you tell your personal story, often that is what legislators remember. We have to know a lot of information. I always say we need to know information that's a mile wide, but only an inch deep on so many issues. But if you come and tell your personal story, like how long it took for you, and I love the creativity of, well, what about the color of these? Can you think of them as just a different kind of a roof? And the persistence, which is, something that people will take away because this is your home. This is your home, and you should have the right to make these kinds of changes and decisions, especially when it affects the bottom line of your pocketbook and your budget. So, and helps all of us move forward with renewable energy. So those stories are incredibly important and really make all the difference when we're considering policy change.
That it is fundamentally property rights. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that anecdote about the American flag legislation. That is fascinating and really something to maybe dig back through Pennsylvania legislation and see if we've got anything analogous. That's wonderful. All right, so Tony, many HOAs have outdated or misinformed opinions on solar, as I'm sure you've heard. For example, we hear regularly solar causes glare or increases the risk of fire on your roof. So how was your company and solar installers more broadly forced to work around HOA restrictions prior to SB 61 passing?
Well, I think, I'll say something, a little anecdote I find interesting that parlays from what we were talking about. So the solar panels, as most on this call will know, it's ideal in the northern hemisphere to have them on the south facing slope. So I remember I met with an HOA and they said, well, you can only have panels on the back of your roof. So I said, so everyone on the left side of the street can go solar and everyone on the right side of the street can't go solar. So it's just, so like, if you want to go solar, should you just trade houses with your neighbor? It always struck me as very arbitrary, who's allowed to do it and who's not allowed to do it based on, okay, so like this is the county line, but like if you're in one county versus the other county, then it changes how the Homeowners Association feels about solar or doesn't feel about it. So on one side of the street, you can have it, but then if you're on one side of the street, but on the other side of the county, then you're disqualified again. So I think that the major challenge, and I think that the challenges are still persisting because homeowners associations they're still very reluctant to acknowledge the bill. So we're having as many fights with homeowners associations now as we ever have. But really it's, I wrote a letter to a homeowners association earlier this year, and I just said, thank you for cooperating with Ohio's law. And we appreciate your participation in Ohio law. And I think that from a challenge perspective, for me personally, it's just really a bandwidth issue, because every situation is a little bit different. Every situation is a little unique. And what I like to do is I encourage homeowners to do exactly what we've talked about, which is go and talk to your homeowners association, find out what it is about solar panels that they find distasteful, or, so encouraging homeowners to, take up the fight on their own. And some people are willing to do that and some people aren't, and it's, I always say, and this is from my seat as the president or CEO, if you have a homeowners association that doesn't support or doesn't like solar panels, install them anyway. Just put them on your house and, and then see what the next steps that the homeowners association will take from there, because we've never been in a legal battle, but we will support our homeowners in communications with the HOAs, why, in a lot of cases, homeowners associations that are trying to restrict solar, there are already solar panels installed on houses in that neighborhood. And in most cases, there's a solar array 2 or 3 or 4 doors down that you can say, okay, well, what is it about this family or this home or this person that made them different? Why do they get it and I don't? So I think that when when I go back to my original point, I can't personally tag in on every single one of these. So we have homeowners association representatives in our company, account managers and things like that can help guide and manage the thought process and manage the communication in this space. I think, homeowners associations in some cases will do whatever they can do to stop it. But you have to have the courage to be able to step up and fight for what's right. And I think that's what this is about. So would it be okay if I put my American flag on my back porch instead of my front, instead of my on my garage? Like, would that be fine? Like, so it really, when it boils down to it, you just have to help homeowners associations understand that the rules tend to be pretty arbitrary. We're doing what's best and what's right. We're helping people save money. We're increasing property values. So I think that, that's historically that's the kind of the, I guess I'm not very good at directly answering questions. So sorry if I didn't answer that question like extremely directly, but I think it's just about taking up the torch, helping homeowners understand what their rights are, walking them through what they can and cannot do. And then also, being amicable with homeowners associations and making adjustments to system designs and all that, doing it on the left side of the house as opposed to the front, and, finding solutions in difficult situations.
Thank you, Tony. No, that was a
Right.
great answer. I just wanted to plug here that Solar United Neighbors has a guide for helping folks who are in HOAs who are trying to go solar. And I see Tristan just added that to the chat. So I think that will kind of complement the strategy that you outlined there. And just for folks maybe who aren't so willing to just go solar the way that you said, Tony, sometimes an option is running for your board for your HOA as a way to kind of get inside and change the rules. We have seen that be a successful strategy for some homeowners, and for every positive HOA story, there are a few negatives. And so we've had a few people join the board and then it go terribly wrong. So, 50-50. All right. And so Mariah, can you, maybe to like really drill this down, can you tell us about a homeowner that had a dispute with their HOA who will now be able to go solar because of SB 61?
Yeah, so beforehand, some of the conversations were like mine, where it just took us a very long process of explaining what solar was and why it was important to allow 2 HOAs. And then there were people, we had a gentleman who joined us for one of our webinar series before it was passed as part of our education. His name was Michael, and he talked about the fact that he had to go around and personally collected those signatures required to change bylaws. So he had hand collected, he lived in a little bit smaller complex, but it still was like 170 some signatures that he had to collect one at a time and explain it out to the neighbors what he was trying to do to be allowed to go solar. And so those were the type of stories that we took whenever we were working on this legislation, that we would take in our testimony and be like, they have to collect more signatures to get to go solar on their own house than you would to run for your position here in, as a state rep or as a senator. It's a big process for a little tiny thing on a home that they own. So that was always a fun one to point out. But then afterwards, we've had several people who are now in the co-ops, especially our Columbus co-op. We had several different homeowners who were like, hey, guess what? I attended your series last year, and now I'm in your co-op because my HOA is now allowing it, with certain parameters. And then we got the opportunity to talk to our installers about, what the law was and wasn't, and how it would help them with these homeowners. And so we had one homeowner, she's went through our co-op. She got her permit in place from the city, which was one of our cities that previously was not quite as solar friendly. And whenever they seen the law going through for the HOAs and condos, they were like, maybe we should adapt our bylaws as well for our municipality. And we were like, absolutely, so it had a nice trickle down effect that other groups also said we should probably match what the state law is, that we should not be blocking this if the HOA isn't now, because we don't want to have that. So they unblocked that on that end of it. Now they're applying to be a Soul Smart City, which is a national organization that helps to bring together municipalities and awards them for being solar friendly and having an easier permit process. So they're applying to, the Soul Smart program. But anyways, that homeowner is now part of our co-op. She's signed her contract and she's expecting her installation in late March. So we've got at least one homeowner who's going to be able to, talk about the fact that because of this rule, she's not only benefited in that she got to have that conversation and it was a more open conversation, but that they have moved along. And then one of our panelists was also her name is Catherine, and she was a realtor, and she has gotten a specific green certification on her realtor's license that they offer here in the state. And she passed along all kinds of great information about the Realtors Association nationwide does a big survey each year that talks about what does and doesn't help property values, and that she always like to point out that page in there that talked about solar and how it does not hurt property value. It helps property values. So they're aware of that if they want to pretend like they are or not, that it does, help property values. So she was a great conversation piece for people who are looking to go solar as well. And it was good to see that, that they're not always against us, that, the Realtors Associations and the condo associations and, our big boards of builders associations as a whole are aware that this is an issue, that homeowners do want these features, and they'll be supportive of them as well.
That's
and
wonderful.
I just wanted to pop in, especially with something that Tony said about, we're still having to go to the boards and we're still having to explain all this. I can't tell you how many times we've passed legislation and this has been the result. Sometimes, it takes years for the public, just to get into the public understanding that legislation has changed something. And so one of the things, I was looking at the list of all the folks, just some of the groups: Community Associations Institute, the Ohio Environmental Council, Green Energy Ohio, Solar United Neighbors for sure. Lots of groups came to testify, and they came in and advocated to the legislators. Now I think it's going to be important for some of them. I'm very appreciative of this conversation today to continue the education. Now it's a little bit different. You know, the education moves from, we're not trying to pass the legislation. Now we're trying to implement. And it's a step-by-step process always. And it just takes time, but I think it's wonderful that the more people that are really educated and informed about the policy change, and that, you know, so when a condo board says, no, we don't allow that, there's information to come back to say, well, as was said by both Mariah and Tony, well, the law has changed. And so, you know, how about we work with you and let's see what we can work out. And but we do have the support of the legislature for this, and I'm not surprised, but happy to hear about the realtors as well, because this is something that people, it's an evolution, right, and an advancement, and it's something that I truly believe adds to the property value and contributes to the raising the valuation in communities and neighborhoods as well. So. Thanks.
The Senate bill is not a magic wand that you wave over the process and then, you know, oh, everything's good. Like, so this is still a grassroots fight that happens at an individual level on a daily basis, and it will continue to be that. I would say almost indefinitely until we get to that tipping point where, okay, this is what's the standard now. So, you know, but I mean, we're every time that we hear a unique story about a homeowner moving past an HOA issue, that is another brick in the sidewalk that's leading us to, you know, ultimately having a clear path in all situations, you know. So yeah, continue to fight the good fight, and it happens on a daily basis. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's part of maybe the important part of the civics lesson, that is representation. You know, people are representative, they take your voice, but you need to continue to have the conversation, and it should be a two-way conversation. And then once legislation is passed into law, we, the citizens, need to continue to carry the activity forward. So there's not a place where suddenly we just get to say, okay, we're done with that, finished up, time to go home. It's really, that's what living in a democracy is about. We continue to work together to advance and to go forward. I wish I had a magic wand that did all that. But instead of a magic wand, what we have is the power of the pen to get the work started.
That's great. That's a great reminder that the work does continue. It'll continue in Ohio and in Pennsylvania. I am eager to get to the point where we can help HOAs implement a solar access law. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all so much. We are going to move now to audience questions. So if you have any, please put them into the Q&A. So I have a question from Phyllis. I found that realtors in Southeast Pennsylvania do not know about solar. I sold my house over the summer, and realtors told me that having solar was a barrier to selling because they have massive misinformation about solar ownership, roof repair. Do you have information I can share with realtors to inform them? And I will open it up to anyone who wants to answer.
I can dig in a little bit. I know that there's national studies that will say there's a % increase to property value. I think the reality is that if your home's worth X and the average property value in your neighborhood is Y, which is $100,000 less or whatever, you may not recover the true value. So, I mean, you're dependent upon the housing market in general during a sales process, but you know, I think that the development in general of people understanding solar, you know, we have, you know, our customers, they sell their houses almost twice as fast with solar panels than they do without. You know, so houses are sold more easily. Houses are sold you know, when you buy a home with solar, you know exactly what your monthly payment is for your electricity bill every month. so you get that consistency and reliability of a mortgage payment when you have solar. So I think, it's the development of the community as a whole. But I mean, I can dig around to see what our account managers are telling their homeowners at this point. Yeah, Tristan's he's one step ahead of me.
Yeah, I popped something in the chat from Zillow that you can take Zillow for what it's worth, but it sort of indicates from their data, their proprietary data, what's going on and what solar can do. And yeah, I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
And perhaps if folks, Mariah, if you've heard from realtors in Ohio, perhaps there's a way to make that connection and get some information from them that the person who asked the question could share with the realtors in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. I've got Catherine's email pulled up here where she gave us the previous Realtors Sustainability Report, which is a nationwide realtor report that's done. But unfortunately, the link is from 2021 and does not seem to be working. So I will contact her and see if she can give me a more recent link. And see if we can't get that added to, I know Monica will send an email after this because we always are trained from day one at Sun to send emails to follow up with all of our participants in these conversations. So I'll try to get that link to her before she needs to send her email.
Thank you, Mariah. Phyllis, it seems like you got the right group of people to answer your question. If there are other questions, please do put them into the Q&A. I think as we wait, I have a couple others. So at a time when there are so many different solar policies for advocates to support, in Pennsylvania, we're looking at expanding renewable energy portfolio standards or enabling community solar, just as an example. Why should folks care so much about solar access? Should it be on their list of priorities?
Well, I think we've talked a little bit about certainly investing in your home and in property investments and things like that. But I think beyond that, there's certainly the concern for the environment and the planet that we need to take into account, getting away from fossil fuels as much as possible and advancing towards renewable energy. But I think the other thing with solar in particular, and I know what we're looking at in Ohio is, it is developing new, and I know some of those jobs existed already, Tony, but it's expanding the opportunities for good paying jobs. It's really contributing, and we see a path forward to contribute to our economic bottom line of increasing that. And as we move away from some of the fossil fuels and some of those kinds of jobs, obviously you always have to be replacing. And so moving to solar creates the opportunity. In Ohio, we know, just like Pennsylvania, we know how to make things in Ohio, and we pride ourselves on that. So there's this opportunity to really expand everything from manufacturing to installation and everything in between. I see that as also a part of why it's so important to invest in solar.
I mean, I think that when you have user generated energy, you are taking pressure off of the most just extremely expensive energy infrastructure. So user generated energy as a whole is impactful in a positive way for the economy, whether it's renewable or not. I mean, it just so happens that we're both saving the environment and we're creating a stronger economic infrastructure from an energy perspective, because you just don't have to transfer and transmit energy. We're walking towards a phase in our country's energy future where we can create the energy that we need, we can store the energy that we need, and we can use the energy that we need, all self-contained inside of our own home. So we're not making something from 1,000 miles away, transmitting it, losing 90% of it through the transmission, you know, and then the major cost per kilowatt hour in our that you'll all see on your energy bill is going to be the generation, but not the generation aspect, but the transmission aspect. So we're eliminating that. You know, so it's just a healthier energy economy that we're creating.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you both so much. I am not seeing any other questions, so I am going to take this opportunity to just thank each and every one of our panelists. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today and answering these questions, talking about your experience in passing a solar access law in Ohio. Really incredible work. And I just want to thank everybody who joined in today. I hope that this has answered some of your questions and how to get this type of law passed wherever you are. And I just thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.